Hi everyone, this is Ekaterina, and this week we'll be talking about our values and beliefs. Most importantly, what is the difference between those two, and why is it so important to be able to identify your own core values and how your beliefs can impact your interaction with other people. I'll share a personal example of how I made that connection between my value, a difficult situation I had to face, and how this self-reflection helped me to let go of this particular stressful moment. So let's start by talking about values. And to put it simply, values are the characteristics, the ideas, the qualities that we feel very strongly about. In a way, they define what is of worth to us. And I'm referring to both things that are beneficial and things that are harmful. And in a way, values affect every aspect of our lives because it affects our behaviors, our interaction with people, the way we speak, our goals, our targets. And they even have an effect on pretty much hundreds of decisions we make every single day. So in a way, you can say that values direct our life. And in our class in college, we were asked a very standard question about, well, what would you do if you found a wallet lying on the street and there was some money in it? Would you go to police and report this finding? Would you just keep the cash and not mention to anyone? Would you try to find, the person who lost the wallet yourself? Obviously, there's a different number of answers you could have, and they came from different students. And even though you might think that some of those answers are more ethically correct, with regards to maybe going to police, however, in the end of the day, we all can come with a very different answer to this question because of some of our core values. Let's revise another question. Let's say you won a lottery. So you've just won, £100,000, and this is a cash that is truly yours. You don't have to think about giving it back to somebody or finding somebody. So it's really your money to keep. What would you do? And again, when we were asking the class, people came up with different answers. Some said that they would like to maybe pay off the mortgage or actually contribute to a mortgage and buy a house. Some mentioned that they would like to support their kids through college. And when I was faced with this question, the first thing that came to my mind was to make sure that my family was financially secure. So I thought of paying off their debt. I thought about maybe renovating their current living conditions. And only then I kind of thought about, well, what would I do with the remaining amount of money and how I would actually spend it on myself. And then I thought about savings, investments, and in the end, I think I only allowed myself to really use about 10% of that money, so let's say 10,000, to perhaps travel a little bit or, take my friends for a nice trip. So you can see how obviously it reflects the values I have, and it also reflects the priority of those values because I definitely put my family first, then kind of all the organization and planning with regards to making sure my future is secure, and only then kind of meeting my current needs of seeing the world or traveling or, buying a couple of things for myself. And another important thing about values that we need to understand is the fact that they come from our experience of being human. So they show us the things that we need, the things that we find important, and sometimes the things that we miss in our lives. So in my case, as somebody who lives in UK while most of my family is back in Estonia, and that's been the situation for the last 14 years, I certainly been feeling a bit isolated and in a way regretful of not being able to fully be involved in their life or support them, because growing up it was a very small family, but we were very much supportive for one another. So I think there's a bit of a regret and there's a bit of that kind of missing of what I could have had if I stayed back in Estonia. Hence, by me thinking about making sure they're financially secure, making sure that they don't have worries about their living conditions, is my way of expressing the family value. And different people who will say that family means the world to them will have different ways of interpreting that value. So it will still affect how exactly you show those values, even though, my interpretation of what I will do to family is different maybe from another person's. Nonetheless, I think it's also helped me to understand that sometimes when people grow up without maybe having very happy childhood memories, as they mature and create their own families, they become very protective of that family. They really want their children to have the happiest time ever. They wanted to give them the things they never had. And again, that comes from the fact that values are not always about the things we have. It's sometimes about the things we've missed, the things we really wanted to have in our life. And this is how it's affecting some of the behaviors we develop as adults. So I really found very interesting this link and this connection that I didn't think of before. And another thing that I think is worth mentioning is that as our life conditions change, so do our values. So sometimes we gain new values, we kind of let go of some old ones, or we just rearrange the priority order. Because in the end of the day, it would be foolish for us to think that all our values are on the equal level. In fact, some of them are definitely more important than others. And as I spoke to one individual, it was very interesting that they remarked that family was important value for them. But as they grew up, they realized that sometimes they found interaction with some particular family members very challenging, and they often felt very unsettled and upset after meeting them. So with time, they had to find the courage to accept the fact that their mental state was more important than perhaps meeting the needs of the family. And they decided to limit the amount of interaction they have with their, cousins or even sometimes parents, because they felt that their emotional state was more important. And here certainly this process of questioning and challenging your values is a good practice, because they really understood what was more important to them, and it didn't change the fact that they still love their family or they would still support them, but they just had to change the priority and put themselves a bit higher in that ladder. And obviously, before you can challenge anything or change your values, you first need to define them. And I think this is, again, something we don't do very often, just sitting down and thinking, well, what are my core values? But as a part of this course where we're really challenged and said, well, here's the time, sit down and think about your values. I found it very useful, and I would definitely recommend to anyone, watching this video, to just find some time and really think of the values of your life. What is truly important? What is something that you couldn't imagine your life without? And another interesting thing I learned in this course is that people often mix up their own values and their beliefs. And in fact, there's quite a bit of a difference between those two, even though I myself struggle to put it rightly in the words. But the thing is that our beliefs are basically assumptions that we make based on our previous experience, expecting things to happen the same way in the future. And sometimes it is based on a repetitive event, so there's a pattern, and sometimes it can be just a single experience. Nonetheless, I think you can all agree that with our world constantly changing, it's a very complex environment, it would be sometimes not really beneficial to base our decisions about the future on experiences we had in the past, because they are not always going to apply, and in some way we are not always supporting ourselves in the most efficient way or meeting our needs by using our beliefs to make the decisions. Hence, why it's really good for everyone to again understand which things are our core values, the things that are universally shared between people, and which things are our personal beliefs, things that we formed from our life experiences, which are sometimes not even true. And make sure that when you interact with people, you make the right decisions that are based more or less on facts, on your true values, as opposed to things that sometimes, as I said, might be not very correct. And as promised, I wanted to share with you an example of how I was able to link a very difficult situation with one of my core values. And in fact, what happened here a few weeks ago is that I had a rather tricky conversation with one of my friends. And afterwards, I felt that it was on my mind for many, many days. I just couldn't let it go. And my partner remarked on this. He really couldn't understand why I was so stuck on this situation, why I kept coming back and kind of replaying that situation in my mind. So I think it was more bugging me, not the situation itself, but the fact that I just couldn't let it go. And gladly, I was able to talk to another friend of mine. She's a nurse, she lives in Estonia, and she's currently studying for a very similar course as I'm doing here. So she's also thinking about becoming maybe a therapist or a counselor or anyone else who can support people coming with, difficult situations or stress, or just who needs a bit of support. And as she listened to my story, in a way you could say we had a bit of a counseling session, she did ask me if I felt that the conversation I had with that other person has touched on a very kind of sensitive trigger for me, whether that person has challenged one of my core values. And in fact, as I analyzed this, it was a very simple question she asked, but suddenly I realized that that was the actual situation. The fact that the other person, whether knowingly or unknowingly, have touched on a very sensitive topic for me, because it was one of my core values, and I definitely felt challenged, or in a way, that other person believed that I didn't possess that value at all. Now, I'm not saying that that person was wrong. Everyone has the right to their own opinions, so it's not about about them being wrong. It's just the fact that I, without realizing, was quite affected by that conversation because one of my core values was challenged, and perhaps the way I reacted in that situation was not the most pleasant way as well. And certainly after having this conversation, after making that connection, I was able to let go, and I felt so much more pleased with myself, and also that whole pressure was gone, because I could finally clearly see as to what has happened, why I reacted in a particular way. And it also made me think about the future interactions I might have with that person or other people, if they ever challenge me again on my core beliefs, that I need to be just more self-aware and perhaps take myself out of that situation, or just be calmer and try to explain my reaction. So for me, it was very insightful, this learning. I really enjoy going through that process of self-reflection, analyzing the situation and making that connection. And certainly in the future, I might have also clients that will face similar problems, whereby they will have a difficult situation and they just wouldn't be able to make sense of it. So together, just like my friend supported me, we will try to find, well, what is the core reason for that distress they're feeling. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. Next week I'll be talking about different types of support that the counselor might seek as they're seeing the clients, because in the end of the day, it's not just about the counselor supporting the client. The counselors themselves need also support as they're practicing. So I will give you examples of the support they might seek, and hopefully it will be also interesting for the viewers to understand the complexity of that support, all the things that are happening in the background outside the counseling sessions. But for now, please remember to leave your comments, like the videos if you enjoy them, follow this channel, and most importantly, take good care of yourself. I'll see you next week. Bye bye.